Okay, here we are. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts about all of this.
Thanks for having me, Megan.
So, you founded Minds, or you co-founded Minds, I believe, in 2011. Is that right?
Yeah, it goes way back then. We didn't launch the app until 2015. So the first few years were very much just a little bit more low key, building out the infrastructure and experimenting. But yeah, 2015 is when we launched.
And what was your aim? What is it that you were and are trying to do with Minds?
It's always been that I feel it's inevitable that there is going to emerge an open source, free speech, decentralized social network. And because all of the major social networks now are closed source, that means they don't share any of their code. So you can't see what's going on behind the scenes with the algorithms and whatnot. They're spying on everybody. Everything's backwards. So if you look at sort of the history of technology, open source sort of is eating more traditional institutions like Linux, took over the operating system world, and now it's a standard. Firefox and Chromium are open source and have sort of become, like Brave, for instance, is an open source browser that's really taking over because it's more transparent to users. And it happened with Wikipedia, even though in Wikipedia is not perfect. It has plenty of editorial issues. But the point is that something that's totally sort of community oriented, like, took over the market. And it's happening with Bitcoin. And so we just think that it's going to happen with social.
Okay. And there's also, of course, the free speech angle. How does that sort of factor into what you were wanting to do with this platform?
Yeah, that's another inevitability. It's sort of like the big tech, all of them basically have the same type of content policy, heavily restrictive, slight variations. No one really knows what the policy is. Sort of what they decide day to day seems to constantly be changing. They have certain words and types of content that they don't allow. And so I always thought that the more content that could be allowed, the more people that would be interested in it and the more popular it would become. Because most people want as much access to information as they can possibly get. That's what's great about the internet itself. And because if you have access to the most information, you can learn the most, and there's going to be a bunch of garbage in there and a bunch of great stuff in there, and you're going to have to do good research and learn how to sift through it. But the fact that the big companies are becoming these silos and, like, it's very diluted. You don't know why you're seeing what you're seeing. You only have access to a certain, that is what North Korea and China do. So it's odd to me that big tech, they talk about caring about information access for the world, but do they?
Yeah, it's totally odd to me in a number of different ways. Partly because I don't understand how it would serve any of these companies to limit access to information. Speaking for myself, I hate using Facebook. I find it so boring. I use it for work essentially because I have to, but because of the algorithm, I'm essentially seeing the same thing over and over and over again. And it's not interesting to me because it's not new. It's not new information. It's not new people. Most of it is actually, posts from people that I don't even know in my real life, and I don't really care to know what they have to think. But the algorithm has decided this is what I want to see, and no matter how I've tried to manipulate it through liking different things, I've tried to teach the algorithm that I want to see something different, and it doesn't work. And to me, that's I'm assuming that I'm not the only one who feels that way.
It's so frustrating. And that's why we have decided that we will always stick to the chronological, pure algorithm in the main newsfeed. And that, potentially people could build their own algorithms if they want something that's more like trending or related to what you're interacting to. We're not like anti-algorithm. That's like being anti-math. That's just a weird thing to, you can't be anti-algorithm, but you can be anti-control, or you can want control over what you're seeing. And, when Facebook gradually changed their algorithm, like, it used to be much more organic than it is now. Like 10 years ago, you could reach a lot of people and it was largely organic. So you would see most of the posts of people you follow. And it was good. Like we could even drive a ton of traffic to Minds way back then through Facebook. And when we saw it changing, and we had pages with like 1 million followers over there, and when it was like, wait a second, only 100 people are engaging with this, like there's 1 million followers, how is this happening? We just worked years to build this page up, and now you're taking away our access to our own community. Like, that was such a betrayal on their part, to have everybody work so hard to build up these pages and then just take away the access. Like, are you joking? To me, that is false advertising. They need to be penalized for doing that, because it's really like changing the terms, and maybe they have some right. But in terms of, it definitely seems like false advertising. I mean, they even sold likes to people so you could get more followers, and then suddenly like that like doesn't matter because their algorithm changed. And there's no way to get back to chronological. Twitter they default you into the algorithm mode, but you can actually change it to see latest if you click this little like icon on the top of the feed. So at least they allow that switch. But I mean, it's like they think that they know what you want more than you, which they don't.
Yeah, no, they don't. And it's, I find it really baffling, because it must be working for them in some way or another, because obviously their primary motive is profit, and that's attached to users and keeping people on the platform. So is this working for some people and not others, or what's happening here?
That's probably true. I think there are, they're looking at data. So they're saying, okay, we tweak it this way and we're seeing users get more addicted to the feed. And so I think more sophisticated users want more control and notice that, hey, wait a second, I'm not seeing those pages that I love, and that's annoying to me, like you just said. But maybe less sophisticated users just accept it and get addicted. But I mean, for instance, on YouTube, I do notice that like some of the recommendations are extremely good. So it's not, again, about being anti-good recommendations. It's about being able to get access to everything you want to get access to. And so Facebook doesn't even allow that. And that's just so frustrating. It does work, and they're looking at how addicted they can get you, but it also doesn't work in certain circumstances. So I'm not sure of the differentiation of when it works and when it doesn't. It seems like Facebook works less well than YouTube, in my experience, from looking at my main feed.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you're right, actually, because when I click, I actually just opened YouTube right now, because I think YouTube does work pretty well in terms of figuring out what it is that I want to see. And Facebook has been failing at doing that for, I think, probably a few years now, at least. And when I open up YouTube, it's often like, oh, okay, this is like a Joe Rogan clip that I would like to watch,
right.
Or this is a like yoga video that I would want to see, or this is some weird, I'm not sure if I should admit to what else is on my YouTube algorithm. The sad reality of beautiful women today. I don't know what that's about, but
and maybe YouTube has a subscriptions feed, so you can get to the raw chronological as well. So, but they push you away from that. And the problem with pushing you away from chronological is that it hurts a lot of people. It helps other people that they choose to surface. But that's where, the unfair bias comes into play. They're sort of picking the winners and losers as opposed to people themselves picking the winners and losers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, and I think this has been a conversation that some of us have been having lately is like, you know, these platforms, including YouTube, will decide that you can't access this information, and they'll limit the, I guess, the traction of certain videos and certain content that would otherwise be getting maybe like crazy clicks or crazy likes or crazy retweets. I mean, Brett Weinstein and Heather Hing have been talking about this. They've been getting dinged on their channel for talking about things that I guess YouTube doesn't want them to talk about.
Right.
And people have been complaining for probably a couple of years now about getting, shadow banned and things like that. And I don't actually know exactly how shadow banning works or how you figure out if it's happened to you, but I feel as though, I've been affected by that kind of thing as well. But that's another thing that I find a bit baffling, is because I understand, based on listening to and reading, about this kind of thing, like listening to, people like you actually, and other people who really understand how social media works, that, and you could probably just guess at this also, that social media, these platforms benefit and profit from controversy and, kind of toxic arguments, because then things go viral and more people participate and more people stay on the platform or the app or whatever. But then at the same time, they've become very invested in banning controversial content. So, that doesn't make sense to me either. I can't figure out how they benefit from banning things that would be controversial and therefore would get a lot of traction on their platforms.
Great point. Yeah, it is sort of a paradox there, because if controversy brings engagement, then, it's the same thing with, banning a major political figure on whatever side. It's like, well, wait a second. Clearly there are advertisers who want, or demonetizing them. It's like, we know there's advertisers who would want to advertise with them just because, they're on the right, they're a big, like Crowder, for instance, like getting demonetized. It's like, well, guess what? There's probably thousands and thousands of huge brands that would want to advertise on his channel. It's not, so when you say he's not advertiser friendly, like, what are you actually saying? I mean, that's just not true. So and that's where ideology does seem to be the reason that they're doing it. They benefited massively from allowing more content, 10 years ago. I mean, YouTube 10 years ago, there was way more crazy stuff on there. Granted, it wasn't a First Amendment based free speech policy like we have, so they were still banning tons of stuff, but it was much more open. And that is when they were going through their massive growth phase. So they benefited off of and same with Facebook and Twitter. They used to allow much more than they do now. So they got that benefit, and now they want to play politics and PR. That's what my gut says. And they have a lot of pressure from the media they're afraid of the media.
It's, yeah, like you say, like it seems like a lot of their decisions are ideological. They're obviously political. I was totally blown away that apparently we learned recently that, Twitter has more power than the president of America has.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
It is unbelievable. I mean, and I wonder who's kind of running the show here. Is this pressure from activists, pressure from political parties, pressure from, the media?
I think that we notice it in all of our own social circles as well. I mean, look at what is happening in everybody's family and everybody's friend group. You notice there's these political tribal battles that are happening, and we know that, for instance, there was a big thing at Basecamp and Coinbase, two kind of big tech companies. Basecamp's like a project management system that they decided to be an apolitical company, and I forget, like some major percentage of the employees left the company because, you know, they were activists. And the reason Basecamp made that decision is because they were, you know, having employees like try to sort of bully them into different behavior. And the same thing happened at Coinbase. And they said, no, we're not going to play politics as a company. And Twitter has clearly not made that decision. And I think that we do see political activist employees sort of dictating who's getting banned. And I have to imagine that the reason that they make certain bans are based on internal company conversations on, you know, what makes sense. It doesn't seem to be based on anything standardized.
No, it doesn't at all. And I mean, like, I don't want to make this about me because, I mean, first of all, I've been talking about this for years now, and it's not, you know, the most interesting thing to talk about. But obviously, I was kicked off of Twitter.
No, we're in the same camp. We probably talking about social media censorship is like, we talk about it a lot, but it's okay. There's always fresh material.
Yeah, I mean, and I obviously, I think it's a really big deal. Like, and I get actually really angry when people dismiss it when I talk about these things, or when people act like I'm harping on it and they're like, oh, you know, it's just Facebook, it's just Twitter. And it's like, this is a really big deal. I mean, this is about, I mean, it's about freedom of speech, it's about access to information, but it's also about who has the power. It's obviously about like our privacy and about data collection. But to me, it's very scary that these companies have this much power. It's not just, oh, so you got kicked off of Twitter, like stop whining about it, which is a lot of, you know, a lot of people respond to me in that way. But
it's so shocking that you got the permaban, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is so deeply terrifying that there's no path to reversing that. And they've sort of, you know, because they said it was permanent, it can never be reversed. It's just, that is unbelievable. And I'm imagining you saw when Tim debated Dorsey on Rogan.
Mm-hmm.
Did they bring up your case on the
debate?
Yeah,
they did. And I never know how to say her name, but the
Vijay, yeah, neither do I.
Yeah, I don't want to muck it up, but I mean, they lied about why it was banned on Rogan, and said that it was like, oh, well, she has this long history of harassing trans people, which is not true. You know, I honestly still don't really truly understand why I was banned. I still don't know what rule I broke because they never told me. I mean, and this is what happens so often in these cases, is they just ban you and then that's it. They're like, you're banned for hateful conduct. But in my case, they never specified a rule that I broke. You know, they didn't say. The best I can do is guess that it was about misgendering, because that's all that I can figure. And because immediately after I was banned, you know, literally within the hour after I was banned, there was suddenly this report published at Pink News, which is like a kind of queer LGBT news site or whatever, saying, you know, Twitter has instilled this new rule against misgendering and dead naming. And I was like, oh, this is really funny timing.
That came immediately after?
Yes. Yeah, it was really very strange, literally within the hour. And I was banned at like 11 p.m. on a Friday night.
Yeah, it's almost certainly internal politics, it seems, because, you know, you're a totally rational human being, and obviously there's just no humanity on the other end of the conversation. You can't even talk to a human at Twitter or Facebook or Google. It's very, you know, you sort of have to like know somebody. I mean, you know, we've experienced it. We got banned from Google Play randomly for like 6 months, our app. And it was because of like a semi-explicit like image of like a girl in like a bikini, and it had a blur over it. And by the way, Twitter allows porn, full on porn.
Yes.
Like, what? How do you allow that, but not, say it makes no sense. And so eventually, like the way that we got reinstated on Google Play, I just sent them an email after I saw the Dorsey podcast on Rogan, and I was like, how are you banning us for this like half naked photo that is underneath an explicit blur, but Twitter allows full out porn? What, like, how is that reasonable? Like, ban them. And 2 days later, we're back. So it's totally these subjective decisions, and it's a total mess. Same thing happened on Facebook. Anytime people would like paste a minds.com link in the messenger, it would just be like, you can't share this link. It's like, unsafe or something. And you would have to do this like CAPTCHA. And then through like a friend of a friend, who worked there, we're like, are you joking? Like, how? And we got it reversed. But it's just these, it's like you have to know someone like in the network, or you have to appeal it to some moderator who happens by chance to think you're right and let you back on. It's not an actual fair system. So that's just totally unacceptable. And it's offensive to particularly like people in other countries where, free speech would be like cherished. Like they would be, so they would feel so lucky to have the freedoms that we have in the US, or, and to see the private companies basically censoring more than the government is like, well, that is unbelievable. I mean, because in Thailand, for instance, we got like this huge wave of like 500,000 Thai citizens who were pissed off at Twitter for like spying on them and censoring some of their activists. So they all came to Minds, and they were, and their government is literally like imprisoning people for criticizing the government. So it's just, they look at people in the US calling for social media censorship over something like slightly offensive, or even that's not offensive at all. And they're just like, how, like, you're so entitled.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and it also is just enormously depressing in terms of the fact that, privileged people, I don't like to, use this privileged banner, but, privileged people living in the West, and people who do have these rights and freedoms that other people don't have access to, or supposedly have these rights and freedoms that other people in other countries don't have access to, and they're living under these really repressive regimes, these dictatorships, totalitarian regimes, and that these progressive free people in the West are going along with this kind of censorship, or even advocating it in many cases, and arguing that, it is right to protect people from dangerous ideas or unsafe links, or, information deemed to be harmful by a corporation, never mind by a government. I mean, in Canada, we are facing government censorship in a way that, our Canadian Liberal government is trying to push through bills around online hate, and trying to subject social media companies to regulation via the CRTC, which regulates, media content essentially. But, this is going to impact individual users, because it will pressure social media companies to take down content that the government deems unacceptable. Right. It's going to be the Liberal government that dictates what constitutes hate speech, or what's dangerous content, essentially. But yeah, I mean, it's not just that these companies are doing this and that the government is doing it. It's that people don't really seem to value their own freedom of speech, their own freedom of expression, their own rights. And it is offensive, like you say, to these other people living in countries like Thailand.
Right. And so you came to the Minds IRL event in Philly, and you remember Daryl Davis spoke, who was, he's a black man who de-radicalized hundreds of members of the KKK.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how did he do that? He didn't ban them or refuse to talk to them. He befriended them and, was human with them. And over a period of time, better ideas won. But that's because he listened to them. And, we're about to release a paper on this. And Daryl actually joined our team as an advisor to help us with this, where this is what's sickening to me about what big tech is doing. They know that censorship is causing more radicalization and violence, because there are peer-reviewed studies. There's dozens of peer-reviewed studies that prove censorship causes people to go insane, because it reinforces their radical beliefs, and it causes them to then go to some other, darker part of the internet, and, with their little group of, more radical people, and, because they can't be exposed to all the people on the other platforms. So they're going to go into their little world. And there have been direct correlations of censorship and violence. So, while big tech is saying, oh, we're trying to keep the world safe, they're actually making the world more dangerous. They're causing all the political polarization. They're causing the chaos and the tribalism. And so I think that over time, what we're trying to do is prove empirically that through free speech policy, we can actually result in a higher rate of de-radicalization than big tech. So, and it's going to take time to show that, but you can't, and a lot of people who are not even radical, obviously at all, are getting banned. So this isn't just like, because there are actual radical people getting banned, and then there's all this collateral damage that's occurring because the AI is stupid, and there's random subjective bans because of activist employees and all that kind of stuff. But, there is radicalization that can occur on social media in a bad way. And there are bad people on the internet, obviously. So it's like, well, how do we actually deal with that on the internet, and what actually works? Well, guess what? Daryl knows what works because he has done it. I guarantee, guess what? No one at Twitter, Facebook, or Google has ever gotten a KKK member to leave the KKK, because they are terrified of talking to anybody who thinks anything differently than they do. So yeah, I think the data will actually prove that free, and that's why the First Amendment is, it's battle tested for centuries. It makes sense.
It's amazing to me how opposed to conversation people are, partly because I really enjoy having conversations, so I don't relate to people who don't want to have conversations and don't want to learn and don't want to try to understand, because I feel like it's really important for us to understand each other for a variety of reasons, to find solutions, for empathy, for humanization, for things like that. But I like learning new things, so I enjoy being exposed to new ideas and challenging myself. And it seems like much of the progressive Western world, really feels the opposite way. And of course, these social media companies are, to me, anti-honest conversation, anti-open, honest, authentic conversation. They seem invested in shutting these things down. Do you think the big tech thinks that what they're doing is helpful? Do they think that they're actually intervening in, or preventing radicalization or extremism or violence or abuse in enacting these policies?
I think that they are looking at limited data sets, which trick them into thinking that what they're doing is working. So one really important example is there was a study done on Reddit analyzing their censorship tactics, and they analyzed like hundreds of millions of posts, and the study shows that yes, on Reddit, you can cause there to be less hate speech. Okay. So a bunch of media took that study and they said, like Vice, obviously, they said, hey, guess what? The Reddit censorship study showed that censorship works. And that was literally Vice's headline. If you actually read the study, which I did, and other researchers have done, it says that those users went to other darker areas of the internet and likely got further radicalized. So it's like, okay, are you really proud of metastasizing the problem? Like, you literally just push the problem onto somebody else. That's so irresponsible. It's deeply irresponsible for the most powerful companies to be pawning this off on platforms, honestly, like us, with less resources to handle it, and we're willing to deal with it. And honestly, 99% of the content on Minds is great, awesome, musicians, artists, journalists, all that kind of stuff. But sure, yeah, like we do get some of the actual intense users who are who get banned, and we're willing to give them a place to communicate as long as they're not posting illegal content or making like actual like threats, specific like violent threats. We're willing to, because we know that the data shows that if we ban them, it's going to get worse, and that over time, if they're exposed to more ideas, they could potentially change. So and now there's all these studies coming out showing that what we're saying is true, and we're doing studies ourselves. And so that's where I want to focus, because I think that you can debate all day about what your side thinks is right, but at the end of the day, evidence is evidence, and I think that we need to take this to more of a data, empirically driven place.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I wonder, do you think any internet censorship is good? Are there things, is there content that should be banned from social media platforms, for example?
Yeah. I mean, we ban a lot of content. We ban malicious spam. There's all kinds of nasty bots. There's obviously like extreme harassment and violent threats are illegal, so that needs to be banned. Additionally, we've taken certain stances, like with animated child sexualization. We do not allow that, and that is ambiguously illegal in the U.S. Obviously, child porn is illegal, but there's this whole kind of nasty internet realm of animated versions of that, which is not real, but so it does fall under some state obscenity laws. And we've just said, look, other states might not, but we're not going there in terms of that, because it's ambiguous. But typically I don't feel we're in a better position to create a speech policy than the First Amendment. I think that that's insanely arrogant to think that a few of your corporate lawyers can somehow draft something that is better for society than the Constitution. So being a neutral intermediary, I think, is really important. And so sort of to move in quickly to like what to do about it. Like, people talk, Section 230, Section 230. Section 230 gives platforms and publishers who have comment sections immunity over user-generated content. So that if people post illegal stuff, that the platform or publisher in the comment section is not liable. There's a lot of misunderstanding about what 230 means. 230 doesn't say that a platform can't moderate. Platforms can moderate, and I think that they should be able to moderate. if you're a phishing social network, why would you have to allow, if that's the site that you're trying to make, like and someone wants to post about, hockey, like why? It's your site. Like you don't need to allow the world to do that. Now, what Clarence Thomas recently said, Supreme Court Justice, is that, and I agree with this, once a platform reaches a certain size, it should be considered a common carrier, which means that they then cannot play politics and that they have to abide by the First Amendment. That makes, so like Twitter, Facebook, all the biggest platforms in the world, like once you reach a certain size, no, sorry, you got to treat everybody the same. And we're sort of taking that stance early. Like we're basically using the common carrier approach as a much smaller platform. Like we got like 5 million users, but we think that is the scalable platform that the world needs. So we're going to do it sooner. But, again, Section 230 is not what needs to be used to hold the tech companies accountable, because Section 230 actually protects companies like us from users posting illegal stuff. It doesn't say that like a platform versus publisher in 230, even though everybody seems to think that.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree with you, because I don't think it makes sense to be holding platforms for everything that their users post. I mean, then I would be responsible for hosting a website where comments deemed hate speech.
Exactly.
It shouldn't be my responsibility what other people say. I can't control that. I don't want to control that. I mean, it's funny because I lost my case against Twitter because of 230, which is sort of confusing because,
right.
On one hand, it protects them from being accountable for what I say. So that, theoretically they shouldn't ban me then, because it has nothing to do with them. That's what I say. It doesn't mean that they're signing on to what I say. But then they're also saying, we have the freedom to ban whoever we want and to decide who publishes what on our platform. So they're sort of using it both ways.
That is exactly the point that we need to focus on. So some people would say 230 needs to be reformed to sort of be more like a common carrier, to include sort of like common carrier type language, forcing platforms to be neutral. But I think that I don't know if that necessarily makes sense, because smaller sites, I don't necessarily think should have to allow everything. I mean, but in your case, like, and I don't think that you would even necessarily advocate that small networks can't, moderate how they want to moderate. But like Twitter is a different situation. It is the public square, and same with Facebook and YouTube and all of them. So, I'm sort of on the Clarence Thomas wave. I think that makes more sense than changing 230. Because even though, you were impacted by 230, it's like, where are we if we're going to have regulation, it needs to be done right. That doesn't take away smaller platforms' speech to be able to moderate how they want it to be moderated.
Yeah, I mean, it's really silly and dishonest at this point for companies like Facebook and Twitter to pretend as though, well, we're a private company, we can do what we want, because it's very obvious that they have such a massive impact on people's lives and, the news and on politics. Like, they have these companies have had a major impact on elections, obviously. They're impacting what people believe science is, and trust the science is supposedly a neutral and non-political mantra that Twitter and Facebook and YouTube is now using to only prop up certain science to censor other science.
Hypocrisy is so deep. I mean, they say that they're censoring certain content to protect elections, but yet they are engineering elections more than anybody. So they're acting like some post from somebody who's talking about election fraud is worse than banning the president or banning politicians, or it's really there's a lot of lack of self-awareness. and like COVID, I mean, same with COVID and all the censorship happening there. It's just, it's sort of assuming that people just don't have the ability to see something that they disagree with at all.
Yeah. And I mean, it's ironic because they present this kind of censorship as protecting people, as keeping people safe, protecting people from harassment, from racism, things like that, which would probably, they would probably argue that that is helping people in terms of their mental health. I'm sure lots of people would defend it and say things like, these things can lead to suicide, so we have to stop it. These things can lead to real world violence and harm, so we have to stop it. And at the same time, I know that you've talked about this before, these apps and these platforms actually, just in the way that they function, are really harmful to people's mental health.
Yeah. Basically, all the studies around dopamine and with all the likes and, teenagers getting depressed because they're not, one's getting more likes than the other, that stuff is really difficult, and it is true. And so there are true elements of that. I mean, there are people who could see something mean on social media and get super depressed. And so the question is, okay, how do you handle that? I think providing mental health resources for people, even if you flag content with a certain word, that, maybe you would provide some sort of resource to a mental health hotline or something proactive that isn't making that, because when you ban that bully, what did you just do to their life? You have to think about the mental health impact on the supposedly toxic people, because that's actually, it's sort of getting into different theories around rehabilitation in general. But there's definitely certain truth to some of their arguments around radicalization, around mental health, but I think that it's just missing half of the equation, and it's irresponsibly pushing those people into much darker places. So I think that there's a balance where you can bring in proactive tools without banning the conversation and harming those that you think are, need to be banned. It's just, it's not okay to be forgetting about the mental health impact of, those are the people that we honestly need to focus on the most. And that's what Daryl would say, is that community, whatever you do with them, I don't know exactly what the solution is, but there has to be a path to redemption for those types of people. Otherwise, the world is just not going to a good place.
Sure. And it's just not so obvious as I think a lot of people pretend it is, what's harmful in terms of what happens on social media, what people say on social media, how people engage in social media. I don't feel that I've ever been super upset or harmed by like some misogynist telling me off. I think that probably what's been more harmful to my mental health is like spending too much time on social media. And to be honest, like probably just engaging often with people who, at one point I would have considered on my side. I don't like engaging in social media arguments. I don't find it fun. I don't find it productive. I feel like it's an energy suck. I feel drained and bad when I do engage after, you've spent hours online and you're like, I don't feel good. I don't feel like we got anywhere. There's no point to that. And so I try to not do it. I just try to not engage in that kind of stuff. And I just think I think it's a little bit kind of silly and like misguided when people act like the only harm or problem with social media is people threatening violence, even people saying mean
Right.
things, people even saying racist things. People see, like, I don't really care if somebody says something sexist to me on social media. It doesn't bother me. Like,
Yeah,
why
it's
would
a
it?
random person. I mean, I would imagine that getting permanently banned from Twitter probably affected your mental health more than some random comment trolls.
Totally. It was crazy stressful. When I got banned, I cried. I was
Yeah.
really upset. I was really stressed
Okay.
out. I
So
was really worried. I was like, how am I going to do my work? Like, how am I going to make a living? Like, this is a big
that's
deal.
the same for every single person who gets banned. And, it's millions of people who are getting banned. These aren't small numbers. So, and to what you're saying as well about, how, what actually causes depression. It's deeper. It is us just being addicted to our phones. It's just the fact that you can't stand in the grocery store line without picking up your phone. That's not any specific app's fault. That's our own faults. So there's, I think, education that we all need. Like, I'm guilty of it. I'm addicted. Are you kidding me? Like, I need to lock my phone in my car and go up to my room and keep it away from me and not, or go out and not bring it in order to not touch it, because I think people are so addicted partially because these are survival mechanisms. These are your chance at success, at a livelihood, at work, at making money, at connecting with people. This is the modern tool for making it. And people in other countries, this is access to information. It's an education. There's so much good about it, and there's reason that we're addicted. It's not just this evil thing. It's very nuanced. And so, and you also have, in terms of censorship and language, if I say I hate you on a comment, I might be being sarcastic and mean that I love you. I mean, you don't know what hate means. Words are just tools for, there can be sarcasm, they can mean the opposite. It could be slang. You will never ban every bad word, because if you ban one word, then, and this is known to be what's happening in extremist communities, they just change the word. It's a meme. You cannot ban memes. It's all encoded crazy language that is, you're never going to get to the end of it. So just automatically banning someone with some AI because there's a certain word that was said on their post, that is the laziest attempt at running a platform for discourse that I can even think of. It's just lazy.
Yeah, it's lazy and doesn't make any sense. And like you say, it decontextualizes every conversation. I mean, what do you think is the best way to combat this? Do you think the answer is platforms like Minds? I mean, is it possible even to hold companies like Twitter accountable, and how would we do that? I mean, Trump's trying to sue them right now. I don't know what you think. I don't know if you think that'll have any success or any impact.
I think that I'm very curious to see how it plays out. And I think that a class action suit that's the type of predecessor to maybe some sort of common carrier solution. I don't know. I certainly think that it needs to happen. So I think that the suit itself is totally reasonable. Of course, he was gonna to fight back, and is gonna bring on. I don't know. Are you gonna get involved with it?
No, I mean, I think it's specific to American
Oh, it's American.
users, and So I'm actually not sure I mean, I actually am an American
Good point.
citizen, to be honest, but
Oh,
I've
you are?
been obviously, I'm a Canadian citizen as well. I'm dual,
Okay.
but I lived in Canada, and when I was banned, I was in Canada. So I'm not sure if I would be eligible to participate.
Yeah, I think that something needs to happen, and it's a combination. I mean, it's a combination of new platforms, and I absolutely do think that new networks will continue to grow that treat creators better. And that's why we're seeing all of the creator platforms grow really fast. That's why we're growing. That is going to keep happening. And, it is possible for major viral events to happen so that, maybe we go order of magnitude. Maybe it, it will happen to others. So yes, alternatives, that's one part. Yes, pushing the major platforms to change through, their own decision and, potentially regulation. I do think you need to be careful about bad regulation. And you need to be really smart. A lot of times lawmakers don't understand anything about social media and technology. And like one thing that you never hear anyone talking about is, you regulate Facebook or all of them. Are you finding out what the algorithms do? If you say you break up Facebook, like which would be a sort of traditional pathway to antitrust. Oh, they're too big, they're too powerful, so you need to break them up into smaller companies. I don't think that is going to do anything, and that's not a good idea, because then you're still not getting access to the algorithms to see what the bias and shadow banning is. So there's still no accountability on what is actually happening behind the scenes. You're just it's like, the cutting one arm off of a multi-headed monster. I mean, it's just going to grow back into a new one. I really don't think that makes sense. So it needs to be smarter. It needs to be something around common carrier provisions, where if they reach like X number of users, then they have to be, treat everybody equally. That seems reasonable. And honestly, I feel like that would make it easier for them. To what you were saying in the beginning, like, why do they want to be dealing with all of this censorship? Like, it limits their potential customers. So, I mean, if they could just say, hey, it's the law that we have to allow everybody, guess what? Now they don't have to worry about all this drama.
No, and then they don't really have to be accountable for what they do, which apparently is what they want, because nobody can say, "Oh, you're not being fair. This is a political decision. This is ideological. You're banning me because you hate conservatives or whatever." All they would have to do is say, "Sorry, all we're doing is we're saying illegal content isn't allowed on our platform. We're just following the law. It has nothing to do with us." It seems way simpler.
I would have to imagine that there are forces within all of the companies that are advocating for that kind of position. I don't think that it is 100% monoculture where there's no debates happening inside the companies. I read one long article about wars happening within Twitter about this very issue. So it's not as if nobody in these companies is fighting for that. And yeah, so that's totally rational, and I think that's where we're moving, and the market is going to build new options, and that's going to put pressure on Facebook and Twitter and Google. And additionally, like something like misinformation, if someone makes a mistake or is wrong about something, does that mean they should be banned? I mean, also there's intentional misinformation, even if it is propaganda. I mean, propaganda is like the nature of media. So how are you really going to ban that? What we're working on is more of a like community powered sort of context tool, so that, on Facebook and Twitter, they're like, oh, this has been fact checked. This is false. 3 think tanks that we hired say that this is false. Well, that doesn't help me at all. I don't know who those think tanks are. Why do I trust what they're saying about any issue, whether it's COVID or elections, or, maybe I agree that with them sometimes, but That's not how fact checking should actually work. The whole community, including all of the thousands of experts and PhDs that are on these companies, on these apps, they should be able to help decide. And so you can see on both, say, a COVID medicine post, all of the arguments on both sides of the debate should be visible to the user who is looking at like that. Say there's a little fact check button. Okay, show me the whole debate, show me both arguments, show me who is supporting the arguments on both sides of the issue, and I'm going to make the decision for myself. Don't tell me what's true. Help me see what the experts on both sides are saying, and do that for me on every topic. You would think that that would be obvious, but that's another sort of example of where I do think ideology is a part of their product development, because it's sort of obvious that you have this amazing crowdsource technology. Why aren't you using it? And you have the most brilliant people on the planet Earth who use your platform. You don't think that they would want to help curate and find the most accurate information? We all want accurate information.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants bad information. Yeah. There's no one out there that's like, give me all the fake information. I want some bad science.
Yeah, I mean, as much as we do like reiterating our own beliefs, I think that only goes so far. And at the end of the day, you can pierce through people's desire to be in an echo chamber with more good information. I mean, I want to be proven wrong, and I think most of the scientists, I know that there's demand for it, and so we're building that. And as much as we'll be coming out with that later this year, and also I don't know if you've heard of Max Tegmark. He's an AI researcher at MIT, and he just launched this app called Improve the News, which is sort of allows you to filter all the trending headlines based on, how much, the politics of it. If you want more nuance, less nuance, more alternative media, less alternative media, more mainstream. And so, these types of tools so that you can just create your own filters, decide for yourself. I mean, that just seems more honest. And to the same point from before, why do they want to be making those decisions? And why do they think that 5 think tanks and nonprofit organizations can research something better than millions of people? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So before I let you go, tell me, I know you have to get out of here. Tell me what's going on with Minds currently. I mean, and do you feel like you've succeeded in your aims?
We're moving in the right direction. We just closed a big funding round. We just raised $10 million to help develop the platform, hire more people, and we are growing. We just launched a whole new chat app. So if you go to minds.com/mobile, you can get both the main mobile app and this chat app, which is totally encrypted. We don't even have access to your conversations. We don't want access to your conversations. And so that's really important because our chat feature it needed love. And so we gave it love. And yeah, it's, we're moving, and we're trying to help creators earn. We have all these new earning mechanisms, both for cash and crypto. And so you earn for all the posting that you do. And we got an automated YouTube uploader, so you can just sync your YouTube and your YouTube automatically uploads to Minds, which actually we should follow up on because that would make it much easier to maintain. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's all good. I try to be patient, because it's not, we make it harder for ourselves to grow because we also refuse to use a lot of the dirty tactics and spying that big tech used to grow. So it's like we already have handcuffs on with how they're censoring us from app stores and, cutting us off. Like, The damage that did to us on Facebook when they were saying that it's like an unsafe site. I mean, I can't imagine the millions of people that probably saw that and were like, why is it saying
Yeah,
that?
like
I mean,
what's on this site? Like
on this site, like that's not cool that they did that. And so that makes it harder. We also won't spy on people, which I don't want to do, refuse to do, but that's what all of the popular tech companies do to grow. They follow you around and they target you in your browser, and it's all this nasty stuff. So it's just being patient and standing by the principles. And yeah, no, I mean, it's good. So just keep trucking.
awesome. It was really great to talk to you. I hope that we're able to connect again sometime soon. I'm sure we'll be in touch. But thank you so much for your time and for what you're doing. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Megan.
Okay. Bye-bye.